Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's actually evening here in Thailand. So I'm Kim, and first of all, I would like to thank for the invitation and the opportunity for me to share my research with all of you. It is about the application of LSTM to predict hydrologic extremes under climate change and land use scenarios in Lancang Mekong River Basin. I'm currently a master's student under water engineering and management in the Asian Institute of Technology. And my advisor, actually, he was here a while ago, but I think he left. My advisor is Professor Sangam Shrestha. A brief background. We all know that climate change has several evidences that it is happening, and one of the most vulnerable regions that is reported is in the Mekong region. And another controversial thing about Mekong region is the dam operations, especially in the upstream portion of the basin, which is in China. And it is said that the climate change can exacerbate the hydrological extreme events such as droughts, extreme low flows, and floods in the region. And actually, a lot of climate change studies have been conducted in the Mekong. However, it focused on smaller regions such as the Mekong Delta and other regions. And most of the studies used physically based models. One example is the soil and water assessment tool, which is watershed model that is used to estimate the water balance. And it can be quite complex, especially for large catchments such as the Mekong. And it requires lots of data and computations. Um, so um, we wanted an alternate method um, to be used to predict the hydrological extremes in the region. And one method that we see is a machine learning model, such as the long short term memory model, that is said to be good for time series data projection. And the objective of this research overall is to assess how climate change alters the hydrological condition of the Mekong Basin. And it is subdivided into three specific objectives. First, we did the historical analysis of the hydrological extreme events in the region, including the extreme low flows and the floods. Next to that, we also did the climate change projection using the state-of-the-art CMIP6 global climate models. And the output of this climate change projection was actually used as input to the LSTM model. And lastly is the future hydrological extremes projections. So a brief background of the study area. The Lancang Mekong River Basin is situated in the Southeast Asian region, and um, it encompasses these countries as shown in the picture, from the upstream in China, Laos PDR, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. It is actually considered as the longest river system in Southeast Asia. And the river length is approximately 4,900 kilometers with a drainage area of about 795,000 square kilometers. Um, and the estimated mean annual flow is around 14,500 cubic meters per second. As you can see in the figure, the elevation varies from the upstream with the mountainous region has higher elevation, and as the river flows down, it goes into more flatter regions. And due to this complexity, the climate also varies. In the UMB or the Upper Mekong Basin, the climate is plateau and subtropical monsoon, while in the LMB or Lower Mekong Basin, it is tropical rain, forest, and monsoon. And similarly, due to the complexity of the basin, the rainfall also varies. In the Upper Mekong, it ranges from 600 to 1,700 millimeters per year, while in the Lower Mekong Basin, it varies more with a range from 100 to 3,000 millimeters per year. So the data sets that I've used in this research are grouped into three. So I used meteorological data, such as the observed rainfall and temperature data, which were taken from the observed gridded satellite product Aphrodite. It is based on ground observations. And I also downloaded global climate models, which are shown here. These three models, which are based from the written journals. They recommended these three models for the Mekong Basin. It gives better performance compared to other CMIP6 global climate models. And these are the resolutions of the data that I acquired. And the duration is from 1978 to 2007 for the rainfall and temperature. And similarly, the GCM starts from 1978 and up to the future period, 2100. And for the hydrological data, I've downloaded, I've chosen just three stations as seen from the figure above. The Chiangsen, Pakse, and Stung Treng. So Chiangsen is considered as the most upstream station in the lower Mekong Basin. And it's nearest to the Chinese dams, while Pakse and Stung Treng is situated in the lower region of the basin. So this is a daily data ranging from 1978 to 2021. And I also use land cover, which was taken from ESA CCI with a duration of 1992 to 2020 annual data. So for the period of analysis, since the available data is the available data of stream flow or the river flow is only from 1978 to 2021, I divided it into training and testing data sets. So it's split. The data was split into 70-30 ratio. And for the rainfall and temperature, this is from the Aphrodite satellite data, and the land cover was from ESA. So in the future years, there's no data for the target. This one is the one we predicted, the target, and the inputs for the future years. For the rainfall and temperature, it's from the climate change projections. That those three global climate models. So it was bias corrected using quantile mapping method, and the median of the three was used as inputs to the LSTM model. So that was the one used in this periods. And then for the land cover, the ESA data was applied a simple linear regression for the future land cover data. So this is just a simple flow chart of what I did for the long short-term memory model. As I've mentioned, the inputs are rainfall. This is rainfall, precipitation, temperature, land cover, and the target is Q or flow. And the data was pre-processed prior to feeding it into the LSTM model. So I mentioned that I split it into training and testing data sets using this ratio. And it was then normalized and transformed so that it's compatible with the LSTM model. And after that, these are the network parameters that I've used in the LSTM model. So I used Keras and TensorFlow. And Adam Optimizer was also used. And to simplify the model and to avoid overfitting, as mentioned in several references, I just simplified the model and used only one layer of LSTM with the following number of cells. It ranges from 8 to 12, depending on the station that I am projecting. And the learning rate, I used a low learning rate of 0.0008 with a batch size of 50, an epoch of 100, and I also use a dropout. I try to limit the dropout was used to also as a regularization technique. I limit it to a small value of dropout because I wanted the model to, as much as possible, also see the peak flows and the low flows, since I'm trying to analyze the hydrological extremes. So I just limit it to only 0.05 dropout. And after that, once the model is optimized in terms of these statistical indicators, when the performance is satisfactory enough, then I use the same model to forecast the future flows. Using the future meteorological data and land cover data as inputs to the model. And after the output of this are future flows, and those were then fed into this IHA, or indicators of hydrological alteration software, to assess the hydrologic extreme events such as the extreme low flows and floods for each of the stations being analyzed. And as for the outputs, so these are the outputs for each stations. The Chiangsen station, as I've mentioned, is the one located in the upper region of the basin, and Pakse and Stungtreng is situated on the lower portion of the basin. So as you can see, it performed quite well. And in terms of the evaluation metrics, it is in the very good or highly satisfactory region. This is R squared, Nash-Sutcliffe efficiency, percent bias, and root mean squared error. So all of the performance indicators are quite high. And these are then the output of the future forecasted flows. Again, this is the upper station, the Chiangsen, and it exhibits a decreasing trend of flows for both climate change scenarios, the middle of the road scenario, and the high greenhouse gas emission scenario. And for Pakse and Stungtreng, which are the lower stations or the most downstream stations, the model forecasted it to have an increasing trend. So I think this is due to for Chiangsen, since I estimated the historical analysis of the extreme low flows, Chiangsen follows an increase of extreme low flows in this area. So I think the model also follow that trend in the future. And similarly for Pakse and Stungtreng stations, the result is that it has higher frequency of floods. So the model also predicted that as a result of the historical increase of floods in the area. So some of the issues that I've encountered, well, the model is quite sensitive to the magnitude of the input variables. And initially, I had a few zero values, so I need to pre-process the data properly. So initially, it is not giving a satisfactory result, but then I tried again to pre-process the data and try to limit the zero values. And then I also find it difficult to run the model for longer epochs, especially when I failed to pre-process the data properly in terms of the data normalization. And although the model showed high performance, it failed to capture some of the peak and low flows of some of in the observed data. And the model is quite prone to overfitting and lots of uncertainties for future prediction. So that's my main challenge, because I don't have any means of comparing the future flows. So I just only rely to the result of the training and testing, the performance, based on the performance indicators. And also, since my data inputs, such as the climate change, from the climate change projection, it also has certain levels of uncertainties. So as a result, I think the model also has a lot of uncertainties for the future flow prediction. And as recommendations for future studies, it's quite difficult to obtain the data, especially in the Chinese region. So I think more reliable sources of data in the upper region would help understand the behavior of the entire basin. And if we try other forms of inputs, such as other flood indicators, such as antecedent precipitation index and drought indicators, it might have a different effect in the LSTM model. So it's fascinating to know what will happen to the model. And aside from the data sets that I've used, it's also interesting to know what will happen if we include other inputs into the model. And initially, I proposed to include the water quality changes with the climate change. However, there are some difficulty in acquiring quality data because there's limitation in the data in Mekong region. especially in the water quality. So I just failed to include water quality in the analysis. But it's fascinating to know how water quality will change with the climate change. And since my model is based on trial and error of network parameter combinations, uh, it is also recommended to experiment with different combinations of these network parameters and the data splitting of training and testing data sets. So I only use 70% of training data. So maybe longer training data set. I don't know if it might improve the performance or I don't know, but it's uh, fascinating to know what will happen if we use higher training data sets. And also um, in analysis of these similar analysis, um, it is recommended to try incorporating some socioeconomic factors that can be used by planners and decision makers. So I think that's all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Really, really thorough presentation. I thought it was fantastic. I want to just open up for questions on the line for anyone who has any initial thoughts, any questions, anything you want to dig into, connection points. Floor is wide open to any of the folks. Go ahead, Biplav.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, Kim. Very thorough presentation. I just have a few questions that maybe you could answer. So I saw that you were using some of the land cover data, and it was 300 meter, as if I remember correctly. Just
Yes.
want to plug in that at Surveyor Mekong, Ate is on the line. We have yearly data of 30 meter. So that's a very high resolution data that we have generated from incorporating different sensors. So maybe that could be useful for your future study. Also, I was curious on the data sets that you use. So the river discharge that you got from MRC, it's a point-based data, right?
Yes.
And the GCM data and the precipitation data, are those a grid-based data? And
Uh,
also, like, what
yes.
yeah, so also how, for
Sorry.
example, what watershed or the extent of the watershed that you used in order to sort of get a single value for the GCM data and the meteorological data sets?
Yeah, actually, I used gridded. The GCM data is in terms of gridded data set. So what I did was I applied aerial mean precipitation method. So I multiplied the precipitation for each area. I divided the whole Mekong Basin into different smaller regions depending on how the rainfall is distributed. So and then I applied the aerial mean precipitation to get the rainfall for each region. So I allocated regions for each of the stations so that I could get just one data for each of those stations.
Okay, and your region
I hope
extended
it's
up
clear.
to the upper Mekong Basin as well?
The upper Mekong Basin, I assume that the Chiangsen station, which is the nearest to the upper Mekong Basin, I assume that it already caters for the China part.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and one last question I have on the LSTM model. So what time period, like, did you use for the training purpose?
For the LSTM, I used for years 1979 to 2009.
Yeah,
So around 30, yeah.
okay, but your LSTM model, like what was the time period it was learning from? Uh,
The,
yeah,
the time period it was learning from.
yeah, because the LSTM takes in the past data, learn the representation from the past data, and sort of gives you the predictions, right? So,
Yes,
uh,
yes.
did you use what was the time window that you used for training the LSTM model?
Okay. I used around 365 days.
Okay,
So assuming 1 year of data.
okay. So your
Okay.
training period is you have certain training period, and then you are testing um, on the period that were before the training data set, right? But I see that
Mm.
you have overlap. For example, your training data set and the testing data set didn't have that gap, 1 year of gap that your LSTM is learning from. So do you anticipate that your LSTM probably is taking some learning from the training data sets while you were doing the testing? Because usually, for example, if you are doing a 30 years of time period, what I've seen from the papers people do is they usually have a year of gap if your time period is 365 days, so that your LSTM doesn't bleed into the testing data sets, if that makes sense.
Uh, yeah, I think I need to check, but I think you're correct. I might have missed that part, the overlapping of the training and testing data set. So I think I need to check that one. It might have affected the performance as well
Yeah,
of the LSTM model.
yeah, just something to keep in mind. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your presentation and the
Thank you so
answers.
much.
Yeah, great question and answers. I want to turn the floor over to Katie. I see you've got a question in the chat. Feel free to hop into the convo.
Oh, well, I used. Can I answer now?
Go ahead.
Thank you for that question. So, actually, I read several journals, and most of them recommended LSTM for time series with long-term data set. So that's the reason why I chose LSTM model, because I'm dealing with long-term data for climate change impact analysis. Yeah. I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else got questions? Go ahead, Aparna.
Hey Kim, nice
Hello.
presentation, and it's great to know that you are working with Dr. Sangam Shrestha. And my question would be, I actually have several questions, but I'll start with, can you explain, like, as you are working on climate change analysis and you have considered around 30 to 31 years of data set in your modeling approach, uh, uh, I understand that you have overlapping of training and testing data, but beyond that, do you think 30 years of, I mean, what are your thoughts on having considered 30 years of data? Why did you consider 30 years and not 10 years, not 20 years, or beyond that?
Thank you for your question. Actually, I am limited because of the availability of the data that I am analyzing. So, as much as possible, I wanted a longer training data set, but the available data is only from 1978. So I use that data set. But given the opportunity, if there are available data earlier data, then I could use that and do the LSTM model all over again.
Okay, thank you.
I have
Just
answered.
on the same line, Can you little bit share what were other limitations for your study?
Oh, other limitations. The most, I think, the one thing is in the Chinese region, I don't have enough data for that. Actually, I don't have data at all. I only acquired data from the 1970s to 1980s. So I think that's not enough for climate change analysis. So I just scrapped the Chinese region. So I'm limited with only the lower basin stations. But as much as possible, I wanted to have an analysis of the overall of the basin. So if given the data in the China, maybe I would have better understanding of the basin as well. And also the dam operations, I I didn't analyze. I didn't include any dam operations in the analysis, but I think dams contribute a lot also on the fluctuation of water levels. So I think for future studies, it should be included as well.
That sounds great. I think there is a potential scope where you can consider different scenarios, for example, dam or other policy related aspects which might have
Yes, yes.
impacted during that period and consider those in the modeling approach. My another question would be, and I will finish on that. I know I have a lot of questions, but just last
Yes, sir.
question so that I keep time for others. Uh, so you mentioned that your data set is for 30 years, but and the resolution of land use land cover data set is 300 meter. Um, but I was also wondering about the validation part of your model. And also the validation of the input data set you are using into the modeling approach. Um, can you give us more insight on that? Thank you.
I actually didn't include any validation in the LSTM model. I only did divide the data set into training and testing. So I think it could have improved if I added some validation as well. But I tried different temporal scale. I tried the monthly data set. I tried to plug in monthly flows into the LSTM model, and I used some validation, but um, I didn't apply it for the daily time scale. So I think I could improve the model if I put some validation into it.
Okay, thank you. I actually worked with Dr. Sangam Shrestha on similar type of modeling approach in the past. If you want more guidance on that, feel free to connect with me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That would be helpful.
See, I love this working group. Just like that, we're making connection points. Great dialogue. Ate, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. This is really great work, and it was a really great presentation. I had two questions, but that were the exact same questions as Biplov. So I have another question as well. You just mentioned that you are finishing up your master's degree, right?
Yes, sir.
So what is?
I'm actually defending tomorrow my thesis.
Tomorrow?
So, yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, if you just do like today, then it will be excellent.
Thank you so much.
What is your plan for after your master?
My plans? I actually wanted to have more research experience. So I think I'm going to continue working with my advisor, Professor Sangam, and try to gain more experience in the research community. And I'm open to other opportunities, whatever is available. But right now, I haven't thought of the long-term plans yet. So, yeah.
The reason why I'm asking is you're familiar with the Severe Mekong project?
I've heard of it. Yes.
So that's led by the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center in Bangkok.
Yes, sir.
We are currently ending the phase, but we'll start a new phase for 5 years soon. And we're always looking for people with your background and to the type of work that you do. So I would certainly recommend to send your CV to the Severe Mekong project.
Okay, sir. I am happy to send my CV.
Excellent. And good luck with your defense tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was just going to add a comment. I was going to drive at that exact same point, Ate. Stay in contact, Kim, with all the ongoing work in South and Southeast Asia. Severe Mekong has a really broad water portfolio that they focus on, and there's a lot of other machine learning approaches that they're doing. You can actually, I'll share the website to see sort of the different past projects, research projects that Severe Mekong has been involved with, but all the other Severe Network hubs as well. So just keep that in your future vision of things too, because it's always exciting work. I'll go back to Biplov. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Good luck with your presentation tomorrow, Kim. I guess this is a good practice for you. Yeah, maybe I missed this on your presentation, but I was wondering, like, how did you incorporate the future or present land cover change scenarios? Because that's the topic of your title, right?
Yes. I just use a simple method, a simple linear regression method in projecting the future land cover data. And then since it's in annual basis, I use the same value for all of the days in 1 year, just like that. So for each land cover class, I used the same data for all days in, for example, 1978. We have 20% of agriculture. I use 20% for all days in 1978, and so on. So I use just simple linear regression.
Okay.
I hope it answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions on the line? I'll do a healthy pause. Well, I have a whole bunch of questions. Kim, I would say, I can't believe you're giving this presentation the day before you're giving your defense. You're made of steel.
Yeah.
I would be taking a nice relaxing break before you go into it. But again, to everyone's sentiment, if you're going to do really well, excited to see what you do next. I had a couple questions on your LSTM workflow. You talked about reducing it down to one layer. And the LSTM is something that we have explored in this group, but we're more focusing on UNets and things like that. So this is sort of a novel architecture that we don't explore as much. I know Biplov's got more experience in that, but do you have any insight that you can maybe provide to the group as to why you configured that architecture that way? Maybe it had to do with, some preliminary testing, maybe the run times, why that sort of structure and maybe the benefits of that architecture?
Actually, that's a great question because as I've mentioned, the selection of network parameters is a trial and error. So initially, I used more layers, but then I think the model it has had a hard time running. So I find it difficult to run it, and it takes longer time to run just one epoch. So then I read several references. They recommended that I simplify the network parameters. So I just used one layer of LSTM, and I think it showed great results. So I just stick with it. And also for the number of cells, I initially tried hundreds of cells, but then it did performed well. But then I think the smaller number of cells also perform well. So I just stick with the lower value so that the model could run in a shorter duration. So that's the main reason why I simplified my network.
Yeah, that's what I was initially thinking too, because I'd imagine it would be a really big lift for all 365 days. So, Biplab, I know you probably have a follow-on to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that was sort of a similar issue that I ran into when I was training the LSTM. It takes a lot of time to train, but at the same time, I was also getting some of these exploding gradient descent problem that I ran into. I don't know if it helps, but there is a lighter version of LSTM that's called GRU that has one hidden layer less than the LSTM, and it has a similar performance with what I've experiment, and also has a less running time than LSTM. So something to look upon.
Yes, I plan to explore other similar models as well if I had the time, and try to compare the results, which performs better than the other. So that's a thought in the future, maybe. Thank you for the recommendation.
That's great. Yeah, I have two follow-on questions that are outside of the realm of sort of the model architecture, and it was in your next steps for socioeconomic data and the impacts of your model. So the first question I have is, as you're thinking about this as an applied science research project, where do you see this research being really impactful? Who will be using it? How can you inform the next steps? And also the connection points. I guess that's the first question. And then maybe I want to just connect you back to Severe Mekong on the socioeconomic component that you brought up. I know Ate may be able to speak to this as well, but Severe Mekong is in the process of developing a lot of socioeconomic factor data that's used for a lot of their other services to drive towards impact. And that might be a really nice jumping off point as well. But I'll just go back to you if you've got thoughts on, how you envision these models being used for your scenarios, obviously, but the relations to like end users and partners that could be sinking their teeth into these results and making decisions with them.
Well, first thing, I think the planners and decision makers will benefit from these types of analysis. And in terms of the socioeconomic aspect, I haven't thought much about the details on how to incorporate it into the model, but depending on the availability of the data, but I need to explore what is the available data that I can acquire that is related to socioeconomics, so that the whole study will become more holistic and realistic as well. So, but I need to put more thought into that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally fair. Ate, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on the socioeconomic and risk impact system that you guys have been developing. I know you showcased that here maybe a month ago. Any thoughts on if that's shareable or if that's maybe applicable to him?
Yeah, my internet is still working. I think we have a presentation planned for that in August, right? Because it's we only have 5 minutes left, and it's a bit of a long story. It mostly relates to including spatial information into hazard mapping. One of the issues with this type of approach is that it seems the output is rather lumped, right? So from the LSTM, we get an output on river discharges. Is that correct? So also for predictions, and when we look at future scenarios, the only thing to work with is the river discharge.
The river discharge, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so to link that information specifically with socioeconomic indicators and also with hazard layers, that requires all translation from discharge to, for example, river height, include that into DEMs, and then do calculations on that.
Yeah, and I think maybe what I might suggest here too is, Kim, as we wrap up, because we only have 4 minutes left, I just want to say thank you for that really fantastic presentation. The call to action I have for you is please stay involved in this working group, because I know Ate is going to be giving a presentation on the socioeconomic connection points. That might be another discussion forum. So there, please, if I know you're busy tomorrow, but this is the working group that meets bi-weekly, and we have plenty of open space for ongoing research, and other folks will be presenting throughout the year. So the invitation